So the film, Impetigore, let us tell you about it because that's what we're going to dive into. Impetigore is from 2019. Like you said, it's streaming on Shudder. So definitely take a look at it. We will definitely spoil some things.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens here. I'm sorry. Content warning for some graphic things that happen in here and for like child death. It's just
like pretty gruesome child death.
Yeah. So just, warnings for that. But definitely give it a watch. If you want to watch before listening to this next part, you're free to do that. But Impetigore from 2019 is about Maya, with her best friend Dinny, tries to survive in a city without a family. She realized that she might inherit a property from a rich family. Maya returns to the village with Dinny and unaware of the dangers that were waiting for her. It is directed and written by Joko Anwar, and it stars Tara Basro and Ario Bayou and Marissa Anita. So, nice. Very female-centric story, like Kat was saying. To me, I feel like this film, it's not quite the generational trauma that Blood Quantum was, but I do think there is this theme of like generational or inheriting like prejudice or like expectations, because like she's coming back and people are holding her accountable for things that have nothing to do with her. Like at the end of the day, and that's kind of like how all of that is, like the abuse that like these women are dealing with is like that has nothing to do with them. It's not specifically their problem. It's just the whole culture. It's like this is what is expected. And so I think I think there's this theme of inescapable curses, like compounding them, right? Like attempting to repair the past only results in more trauma and guilt and grief and pains.
like reopening wounds, essentially.
Yeah, but also it's like it'll just take a new form, and it's this question of, can we truly escape the trauma of our ancestors, and can we ever go home again? Is it something that we should just separate ourselves from? Because ultimately, like, she goes back there and she's in danger. Like, you in danger, girl.
Run.
But what struck me was the beginning of this film, which really sets the tone for being a woman and being afraid. Yeah. Because we have Maya and Dinny, who are both toll booth workers. They work in different toll booths, so they just communicate over the phone, kind of like what Kat and I are doing virtually, right? Like having this connection, but still being far. And so Maya is there, working in the darkness. And she like brings up that there's been a creepy stranger who would drive by and just stare at her. And that he comes several times a day. Like that, it just seems like, unnatural or like that's not what usually happens. Like, who comes through a toll booth so often, and in hers, like almost like he
like make sure schedule. To go to hers.
And so like that is in any like woman who, like, especially existing in America, I'm sure have had that experience where there's someone who you don't want to overreact, right? Like, you don't want it to seem like you're being paranoid or, suspicious, where it's just like, but that person is walking like in the same direction as me for quite a while. Or why did they come into this store at the same time that I did after like trailing me for this whole time? Like, I've had that. Like, I've had things where I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a different route home, like take the longer route so they don't know where I live or something like that. And so it's right away I was like, I'm afraid, like with her, like I understand that fear, like in that paranoia. And it kicks it off with the fact that he shows up and he stares at her. And I think when he pulls over in the background, I remember you and I were texting while we were watching it, and we were both freaking out. Like, we were panicking with her. And as she's like frantically like trying to slam the door, she's calling like her friend, she's trying to call the people. It's like, do I wait in this tiny little isolated box to save myself? Do I run? Like, what do I do? Like, it's just me against this man I don't know. For no reason, he wants to attack me. And like at the end, it's usually how it is, right? Like you don't have any good reason why they are attacking you, and they ultimately just are. And it really is the heart of this film, which is the struggles of these women. From Maya and Dinny, their struggles kind of through their normal life and kind of setting the tone of she doesn't belong and she's a loner, she just has this friend, to being in the village and then meeting every woman in there, like every single woman I felt for. Like even the so-called villain, which we'll talk about too, I was like, she ain't wrong. She ain't wrong either. Like at the end of the day, they all are kind of justified, and I think that's really authentic and interesting for a film. That like each one of these is made victim to the misogynistic and patriarchal society that treats their bodies as vessels.
Yeah.
And that's like it. Right? So Maya, our protagonist, is an orphan and an outcast, and she learns that she's inherited potentially this home, and so she has to return to this like lost in time village that is very difficult to get to. It is moody, dark, depressing, and I really love the nature of this building. There's like this transition from like the city, right? We're on the bus, right? That's a way of transportation. Then we're on like this like carriage, right? And then we're like going in there, and then we're on foot when we're in the village. So it's like this, like we're slowly like losing the technology and the like normal society, and we're like traveling back in time into this village. And the village is like you remarked on it a few times, Kat, was like how beautiful the nature was. Like the trees are like wrapped in vines, and they're always kind of framing the shots. Like the scene is always happening between these trees, and like there's the beautiful cemetery that's super sad. Like her house that she inherits is like awesome because it's huge, and she's like, I've never seen a house this big, which is already like a red flag, because it's like, why is no one living in this giant house? Everyone's living in their small houses. And then it's like wrapped in vines. It kind of reminded me of Crimson Peak, how it was like that beautiful mansion, and then there was like everything was falling apart. And like the fact that she has that the bed, or not the bed, the tub, and it's like such a great tub, but then there's the vines on the wall, and like they still have to like pump the water. So
there's
like
a lot of water to have to pump.
Yeah. And it's like this dichotomy, right, of like wealth, but also just like the nature of it. Like it's returned to nature and it's been abandoned, and it is the symbol of wealth and also the symbol of pain, which is like, those are one and the same, I feel like. So I think it's shot beautifully throughout the whole thing. I think it's always kind of desaturated. Like you can, like it changes the time of day, but it is always kind of the same tone throughout the whole time. So you don't really even notice. It's just like every day is the same. Every night is the same. It's desaturated. Yeah. It's kind of claustrophobic because of the vines and the nature and the way that the town, like the village, is kind of close together. And it's like grungy almost. Like you just feel kind of dirty when you're watching it. Or not dirty, but just like you've been trekking through with them.
You're also in the nature.
Yeah. And it's like also like when they were... when they were in the beginning, when they're in like the city part and they're in like the marketplace, like it's like sweaty and like full of people. And then we get to this like village and there's like no one, like you don't see anybody. And I thought that was like really weird. In the blog that you could read on our website, I wrote, "A good man is hard to find," because it's one of my favorite short stories. But it is impossible in this film to find a good man. There are none. There is zero. And I think it's because of it is representative of the patriarchal society that's super toxic, and it destroys itself, right? Like because there are people who are trying to fight against it, and then it just like keeps building and compounding on itself. And the village, and it ends up twisting it and destroying it from the inside. But every single man in this film is toxic. Both of Maya's supposed fathers, so she has like the one that she thinks is her father, who's a rich guy. He's evil. Like, he didn't commit the murders that they said he did, but he did kill 3 children.
Yeah.
Her actual father, who she finds out is her father later, did commit those crimes that they put on the other dad.
The other guy, yeah.
So it's
not
like
the children, but the other ones.
But he killed other children instead.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is super ableist. But also, like, I understand. Like, this is a small, remote village. It's not like they got health care. But still, super toxic. The village men are awful. One, in that, like, they allow their children to be murdered.
Yeah.
They're alive. Those kids are alive. They're not in the best shape. And maybe that could be a cause of, like, the fact that this is a small village, that no one leaves, no one comes in. So maybe there's some incest happening, even by accident. But, like, that could be an explanation for what this curse is. But at the end of the day, they're letting their kids be killed. But also we see there's another woman, Rati, who is very pregnant, or a little pregnant. And she helps Maya. And there's a scene where these men come in, and because her husband isn't here, they, like, try to rape her. Yeah. They try to attack her. And because her husband isn't home. Like, they respect him, not her. You're open for us to have. Like, we're in the middle of looking for a woman so we can murder her to save our children. But on the way, we're going to hurt you. Like, that's how twisted they are. Like, it's just absolutely toxic. And even, like, Rati's husband. So, like, Rati loves him. But it's like, this is a guy who she, like, grew up with, and she's got to be with this guy. She's got to be the wife. And she loves him. But even he shows his true colors, because he was the one who attacked her in the beginning.
Yeah.
Maya. So it's like, no one is good. There's not a single good one. And I think, like, that really kind of shows how deep it goes, like, that you can't find a single good one. Even thinking of, like, Ni, the older woman who essentially starts the curse spiral. She started it because her son was cheating, like, being a cheater. He was being adulterous with another man's wife. But that son that she has is the result of being raped by a man who was the previous puppet master. So it's like, it just keeps going. Like, her son let her down, and then also, like, his existence isn't what she wanted anyway. Like, or, like, wasn't planned and didn't come from a good event, right? Yeah. So it's like, not giving her excuses, because, like,
well, she was super evil, but yes, trauma, super evil, hurt people. So
exactly, yeah, she's definitely guilty, but I can understand what led her to that, right? And I think with her character is that she really wanted to undo this curse. I don't know if she fully understood that it was her fault. Yeah. I don't think she really was, like, the puppet master, the ultimate puppet master that was pulling the strings and causing all of those deaths. I think it just kind of happened, like, it spiraled out, and then it was, like, out of her control, and she so badly wants to fix that. She wants to redeem herself. And I think every time a baby is born without skin, she feels it. And that's why she has grown desperate and wild and is, like, trying to kill and stop this by whatever means necessary, because the grief just has corrupted her. And it's, you know, in a way, I feel like that might even be an element of the curse itself, was, like, a way to, like, get into, like, curled up into her and cause her to do this as well. So there's an article on Horror Obsessive, which you talked about a few times, Kat, called Women's Pain in Ying and Impetigore. And I also read it. It's by Rebecca Saunders. And because it's very good. It is, you know, really calling out this film and explaining some of those injustices and what it's really saying, the major themes of it. And one of the quotes that I pulled from it was, "Overall, the horror of Impetigore is rooted in the victimization of women and children. In fact, depictions of violence against children in this film, while not fetishized or overdone, are almost intolerable. There is not a single sympathetic male character to be found in the city or in the village, and even male characters who are marginally sympathetic are eventually traitorous." Dinny's cruel fate is the earliest example of brutal female victimization in the film. The mystery of the frightful ghost children once revealed exemplifies the treacherous exploitation of children, and the multitude of pregnant women whose babies are not allowed to live intensifies the focus on this type of victimization. What I found the most interesting in this film was the justification for the horror. It's not often that you have a cult horror film or a folk horror film, like thinking of like Midsommar, right? Like I do not feel for the people in that village at all. I was never like, it makes sense to me. Why not?
Yeah, they weren't like going through anything. They were just like living their life and chose to make these decisions. Exactly. Where like here, they're going through horrific things.
Yeah, like these are people who are plagued with years of pain from this plague that has infected their children. It's like, imagine being a woman in this place and there's no contraceptives. You have to get married because that's your only role in society. You know, as soon as you get married, you're going to be pregnant. And that whole time, you can't ever allow yourself to be hopeful. You can't ever allow yourself to love what's in there because you know it's going to come out broken and that you don't get it in the end. And it's just like repeating that same grief over and over and over again. Like that is a specific type of evil and trauma that like you cannot just like get up from. Like you don't like, if the curse, suppose the curse is lifted even, like I feel like if you had lost 1, 2, 3 children to the curse in the beginning, it's like you would be so afraid to find joy and to allow yourself to believe that this one was going to be okay. And so like that itself is a punishment. It is a pain. It is a restriction that like they can't even find joy in the one thing, right? So like for 9 months, you are just fully aware of the futility of the situation and that it is doomed, whether you like it or not. And I think that's really heartbreaking because, and it's also like the husbands too, right? Like, they're not redeeming, but that's kind of like they've been stripped away from like the fact that they're supposed to be a father. Like they let their children down because this curse exists, like because their kids can't even exist. They can't let their name go on. Like so many of those things that are so like patriarchal and misogynistic are being canceled out too. And so like it kind of corrupts them and they're all twisted. And so, there's just this immense grief in these villagers. And so when they are like turning into a mob and coming after Maya, I honestly was just like, I get it. Yeah. I really can't blame them because like
they just want their babies to be okay. Like ultimately, like they just want to be able to, as you said, like the patriarchal end, wanting their names to go on. And the only way that can happen is to sacrifice one person. So they're like, we've been having to sacrifice all these children. Of course we're going to sacrifice her.
Yeah, it's like, what's one woman I don't know who has a history of evil that we know? Like her dad was evil. That's all we know. And that's like the one person that we believe in told us to do it. Like, what else do we have? Like, that's our only bit of hope. Yeah, I think like even in the very end, so like the kind of closing scene, we see that when you let your guard down and let even the minimal amount of joy, like we see this joyous couple, it only creates even more pain because her scream was because they thought they got out and she had the audacity to dream of a future where she had a kid that was normal and that she could have it, right? Like that she could just get to live this future.
Yeah, they were actually hopeful, which makes the devastation even worse. Where it's like, it's not worse, I guess, but like it hits harder in that like when you go into something with expectations and those expectations are like devastated, like you become devastated. Where like if it still is awful, but you've like guarded yourself a little bit to it.
Yeah, like because we see it, there's 2 women who are told, like the first woman where you think because, they think the curse is lifted, she thinks that her baby's going to be fine and then he isn't. And she's like destroyed. And then we see a second one who doesn't believe it because they don't know that they're worried about the curse. They don't think it's lifted. And then it turns out that the kid is okay.
Yeah.
And so there's like this weird like, oh, I get a kid now. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. I was setting myself up for sadness. And I think that really is the heart of the curse, is that you can't escape, right? Like the fact that it gets compounded and all of that, but the real horror is that you can't even allow yourself to hope and dream of escape. And that really is what tears people down, and destroys what little like joy or happiness that they had in there. There's another article I found on the spool called Impetigore Drags You Through the Curse of Country Life, by Clint Worthington. And it says, Onwar's latest is a tragic supernatural drama about people caught on the raw end of a deal someone else made for them. The villagers are frightening and in the thrall of murderous forces. When Maya asked one sympathetic villager why they follow Biyu's character, her response is, who else do we have to look up to here? But they're driven by desperation to lift a curse that has claimed their children for years. Obviously, we root for our heroine to lift the curse without having to lose her life, but the savagery of the townsfolk is born of genuine, decades-long pain they're willing to stamp out by any means necessary. And in the end, they are led, to destruction by the people in power and the people that they trust, the people that they thought were looking out for them.
Yeah, where they thought were like the ones ending the curse, not the cause of it.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things is, so Rati is a woman who has a ridiculous amount of hope for such a bleak place. Like she just, like, no matter what is thrown at her, she kind of is she's like, okay. Like she's getting through it. She's like, yeah, well, gotta keep going. And she, explains that her mother is a spiritual woman who told her that you can't remove a curse. Like, you can't get rid of a curse. If you do that, it'll be replaced with a worse one. And that's kind of like what we see. Because we see, like, the first curse was just on this one woman, and then it spiraled at, like, which is what Maya, like, was cursed not to have skin, which then resulted in, like, her dad doing demonic stuff and killing children, which then like resulted in this guy killing like villagers, which resulted in the village not having any children with skin. And I think like it's hopeless again and like tangled up, because it's just like the only answer at the end is to leave. But Maya tries to fight and stop the curse, which she learns is not her father's, but her grandmother's curse. And it just, I feel like it was pointless, because you can't break away from this curse. It just evolves and never lets you go, which is really bleak, and sad to envision. But I think it really did speak on the issues that these people have been facing, is that there's just no one there to help. And I don't want to say like you're all on your own, but you are all on your own.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, can you ever go home?
Yeah.
No.
That was a super sad film. Worth it, but so sad.
Yeah. Like in the horror of it was very unique. Like there's no, like you said, like jump scares. There's like spooky things, like where there's a lot of darkness and you're always looking in the darkness for whatever it is. And there are times when there are things out there. There are ghosts, like there's the 3 ghost girls. But it's really what is terrifying is the situations that are happening. It's like seeing the children, or seeing the one child that got to live and they just abandoned him in the woods. Or like seeing that guy at the beginning, like I was like, this is terrible. This is the most horrifying film for right now. But like, yeah, I think they were all very authentic, natural scares, that were just good.
Yeah. No, it was really well done. It was also like, I watched his film festival thing. That he like was talking about how it was made and whatever. And he actually like went to villages that like were in the middle of nowhere to film and like stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool too, that like he was very authentic in even location to what he was trying to portray. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very intentional. There's another film by him that I'm sure we'll cover later as well, that people rave about as well, because he just has a very natural way of, you know, using the environment and using just human emotion to drive the story and not rely on like jump scares or, you know, monsters, right? Like, because again, the monsters are the people. And it really was it really got to my heart. Like it was heavy in a different way than like Blood Quantum was. Like Blood Quantum was a lot to take, and like I felt sick, like in a way that like was good. Like I appreciated it, and I think it was really inventive. But this one was like, it just sat with me for a while, where it's just like, could you imagine? Like, I can't even be mad. You know, like I can't even be mad. And I think that speaks volumes of what happens when you're authentic and you're intentional in telling your story, and seeing like how it ties back to the reality of the situation too. It's like phenomenal.